Welcome to the UFC. For a familiar face to a lot of different people, we have Money Mike Breeden coming in on short notice, taking on Alexander the Great Hernandez. Do I like guys named Alexander who then happen to have the nickname the Great? Well, some of them. I mean, Alexander Volkanovski from this past weekend, he's definitely deserving of it. For Alexander Hernandez, a bit of an unfortunate nickname. If you really look at it for the 5-on-in, I mean, the guy's 2-3, and Mike Breeden has the opportunity right here to have a debut like Hernandez did when he took on Beneil Dariush early on in his career. But if we do dissect that 5-on-in for Hernandez, it is the loss to Cowboy Cerrone where he talked all the smack. Then he beat Francisco Trinaldo, but if you're Craig Allen and a lot of people in this world...
If you're anybody outside of San Antonio...
Yeah, you really don't think that Hernandez won that fight. Then he lost to Drew Dober by knockout. He beat Chris Gritzmacher, and then he ends up losing to Thiago Moises by decision. Now, I can't fault him for some of those losses. I mean, they're against very good levels of competition. Alexander Hernandez at one point looked like not just a future top 15 fighter, but he looked like he could really climb the ranks. I mean, he has a great physical size for this division. I mean, yeah, he might be a little bit shorter, but the way that he kind of plots in against his opponent, throws those long power shots, and he has range for a smaller guy, and I say smaller, but a shorter guy, but then he does struggle when it gets into boxing range against certain guys. The Drew Dober fight, a perfect example.
I'm going to disagree that Hernandez has a great size for this division. I feel like he's undersized at lightweight. I always have. He's talked about even moving down to featherweight in the past. I really don't think this is the best division for him. And not just to be so hard, like, against what you said. It's just... For Alexander Hernandez, for his game to really be at 100%, he always has to take his opponent down because his striking is good and his wrestling is good. But when he mixes the two together, that's when Alexander Hernandez himself can become great. Look at the fight against Olivier Aubin-Mercier. And I know that was a weird fight. It was probably closer than a lot of people thought it was. But still, he beat that fight by out-grappling Aubin-Mercier. And if you beat a guy like that in that style, it means a lot more to me than if he just went out there and knocked him out in 3 seconds like he did against Beneil Dariush. That's the issue with Alexander Hernandez. You talk about how, you can't really fault him for a lot of those losses, and you're right, but the way that we talk about Alexander Hernandez means that, okay, you can't just be losing to these guys anymore. If we're going to talk about you as, okay, a potential top 15 or future top 10 guy, then you can't go out there and get head kicked by Cowboy after not really landing a single significant strike. That's why, for me, I've always felt like Hernandez was going to move down eventually. Now, I know he is kind of young, and he probably is still getting bigger, so maybe that move down would have been in the past now, but I've always felt like his best days probably were down at 145 pounds.
If we look at it for Alexander Hernandez, too, similar to Roxanne Modafferi, you got a birthday on the Friday, you fight on the Saturday. For Modafferi, it definitely didn't work out for her. So what do we know about the short notice replacement, replacing my guy, Leonardo Santos, in Mike Breeden? Well, I said he was a familiar face because if you go back and watch his fights, very, very fun style. He's got a flying knee knockout win over Brandon Jenkins that debuted in the UFC last weekend. And I have to say this, some of these short notice guys and gals are not UFC caliber. Straight up, not UFC caliber.
You're right, but the issue is some of them come in and then get a knockout win in 3 seconds.
That's true. Mike Breeden is the type of guy that has a loss in his 5-on-in to Anthony Romero that a lot of people thought probably was deserving of the UFC call-up, but unfortunately Dana White wanted to see a little bit more from him. So for Breeden, he loses that fight. He goes out on the regional scene. He gets a win over 9-5 Ken Beverly, knocks him out. And then he fights 12-8 Nick Compton. Now, Nick Compton, that was a short notice thrown together fight. Compton was 39, and in the first round, Compton beats Mike Breeden, and he has an armbar that would have made most men and women tap. Like, it was tight. And then he gets a little bit tired in the second round, and Breeden starts to take over. And if you watch a lot of Mike Breeden fights, he reminds me of the perfect boxer for MMA that also throws a nice calf kick. He's got a really good combination where he stands a little heavy on his lead leg, and he just lets his hands fly. And I kind of liken him to a little bit of a watered-down Nate Diaz when he is boxing. Because, again, stands with his head up, his foot forward, he throws in combination with the boxing, and then if he needs to, he can throw a little bit of a misdirection. If it's a spinning shot, if it's a flying knee, he's got those tools in his back pocket. He's coming in out of Glory MMA and Fitness, and I like what I've seen, but at times he doesn't have a lot of output. And if you push a pace against Mike Breeden, he can kind of just shell up and he gets a little defensive.
And that's the thing about Mike Breeden. He's almost too patient for his own good. I liken his striking a little bit to Uriah Hall's in that fashion, where Uriah Hall can spend like minutes, if not rounds, setting up a strike that never actually comes. And for Mike Breeden, you're right. When he does lull guys into a false sense of security, he can hit them with one of those big strikes, a spinning back fist, an overhand, a flying knee, any of those big knockout strikes. But the issue is that it takes him so much time to set those techniques up. I really worry about him just getting off to such a big deficit in the numbers game against Alexander Hernandez, because I know everybody knows Alexander Hernandez for the knockout win over Beneil Dariush, but I really think of him more as like a cardio machine type of a fighter. When Alexander Hernandez is at his best, he's throwing a very high number of strikes. He's getting into the clinch. He's going for the takedowns. He might not always get them, but at least he's making his opponent work, and that's really going to be the key against Mike Breeden. Also, they're doing him no favors giving him Alexander Hernandez as a UFC debut. And I myself have said Hernandez is a little bit overrated, but still, he's been in the UFC for a while. He has some decent wins. He has some decent performances. It's a really hard ask for a guy on not a week's notice, but still, in his UFC debut, to just show up and try to beat a guy who was ranked at one point.
Breeden is almost like a Yorgan De Castro type. He went 3-4 in his amateur career, and then as a pro, obviously 10-3, as you see in front of you, but 8 of those wins by knockout. The level of competition, if you combine all the wins, was 52-33, so it's not really the sexiest of records, but again, a guy that fought 3 times in 2017, 4 times in 2018, 3 times in 2019, twice in 2020, and once this year. And in that Romero fight against a guy that can wrestle and really put it all together, the judges' scorecards, 30-26, 30-27, 29-28. So when I look at the odds for this one, Hernandez, a heavy favorite, open to -300 or thereabouts. He's minus 500 according to best fight odds. For Mike Breeden, open to +250. He's a +372 right now. And if we have a look at the Topology votes, surprise to us as they are to you. And 714 total votes. 93% Hernandez, 64% by knockout. For the 7% that have Breeden, 53% by knockout. Matt, again, I think you're not really doing Breeden a whole lot of favors. He's not a volume type of guy. Could he knock out Hernandez on the way in, like a Dober? Possibly, but to me, I think Hernandez is a little bit too busy, and I think if he doesn't overthink it, goes in there, puts on the wrestling shoes, it should be a decent win for him.
I agree 100%. The only issue with this fight for Hernandez is if he doesn't win it in impressive fashion, then people are going to be completely off the hype train. It's kind of gotten to the point where it's like, okay, we know you can't beat the elite, so if you don't blow the doors off a guy making his UFC debut, then where do we really put Alexander Hernandez in the whole landscape of the lightweight division? But I still think he'll win this weekend.
Both of us going with Factory X's own Alexander Hernandez to get the win. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have in this fight, and you're not going to want to miss this entire card. Co-main event. Holy smokes, Holland taking on Dawkins in the main event. Walker and Santos. Let's keep locked in with Fight Night picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.